On 22nd April 2025, Islamist gunmen of the Resistance Front (TRF), an offshoot terrorist organization of Lashkar-e-Taiba, slaughtered 26 civilians in the Indian-administered part of divided Kashmir. It was a brutal attack in which innocent tourists, majority of them being Hindu Indians, were singled out for slaughter.
ये आतंक का बहुत विभत्स चेहरा था, क्रूरता थी। ये देश के सद्भाव को तोड़ने की
And this terrorist attack was answered by the Indian government in form of strategic military
And so we
operations
wanted-
titled Operation Sindoor.
First of all, to avenge that act of wiping off the sindoor. But secondly, it's no accident that the color of the sindoor is that bright vermilion red, which is not far from the color of blood. And
But the point of this video is not to just talk about the conflict between India and Pakistan in May of 2025. I am interested in how we saw it happen. I am fascinated by the role of the traditional media like news channels and also the role of social media platforms in the face of war. To dissect this, I had the chance to sit down with political strategist and international relations scholar Mr. Shrenik Jain. My very first question to him was whether or not war journalism can ever be truly neutral, or if Indian television news channels and newspapers are inevitably drawn into the broader narrative war.
Again, I feel in the recent times there have been multiple incursions. So for anything to be neutral, we just need to identify the biases and remove the biases. So the first bias in itself comes from the fact that your country is the one that is either going on war or is in a warlike situation. So the first bias will pop up right from the fact that it's my country. So all the narratives will be spun around in that way. Plus, there is this additional element of privatization and that too a lot of capitalistic divide within that market. So which channel is doing a higher TRP? Then on the basis of that TRP, how much advertisement are they, getting into? If there is any one particular sponsor who's getting them a lot of advertising, then inherently there will be certain news segments which will be a little bit biased towards them. And now that little bit is very subjective. For some news channel, little bit can be a 1 hour show. For the other news channel, it can be a 23-hour show. We don't know for all that, you know. So I feel it is next to impossible also in terms of the editorial choices, which stories to run. How do you spin that narrative? How do you give out that story? And that storytelling along with propaganda, that sort of pushes it more towards being less neutral and more targeted.
So my next question is that how do governments construct media strategies during wartime to safeguard own political interests and national interests, and what is the public's role in this process?
Hmm. I think for any government, it majorly rests on three pillars, or should I say three steps. First, I think, is control. What is the information that is going out? How much censorship can there be? Is press access there or is it restricted? Are we vetting the information that is going on or not? Then after certain bit of information is controlled, which the government does not want to be shown out or stuff like that, then comes the spin. How are we pushing the story forward? And then the final nail in the coffin is the amplification of it. That, okay, what broadcast channels are we using? Because if we're talking about a government machinery in itself is not just restricted to its broadcast channels. And now, if you consider, let's say, the government of India, we say the government of India in a time like war has 28 additional hands in the terms of the state governments. Then every state government also has further hundreds of hands in terms of every little PSU that they're running, every little department that they're running, with their own specific reach and kind of people that they're attaching, the kind of people who are watching them or interacting with them. So in those moments, the narrative that any government want to spin around becomes comparatively much easier than it would be in a normal situation, which is not warlike. So I think for a government in a warlike situation, it uh, sadistically so provides a very ripe groundwork to sort of spin out any narrative, at least for the short term. That line between patriotism and propaganda has consciously been blurred because I feel one feeds the other. If a person is not patriotic, you cannot possibly use them for an agenda. If I were to say I'm not in love with my country, so you can't spin that India-Pakistan narrative with me, or you can't spin that India-China narrative with me. So I think, of course, propaganda stems from the fact that we know and we believe that a majority of a population is patriotic, or the fact that patriotism brings out a strong emotion in them. But then identifying that line again comes from identifying the biases. If recently I was having this conversation with a very senior former journalist and now a political strategist, and we came up with this analogy that with the media outlets, the storytelling bit was the one that pushed news to propaganda. So we came up with this analogy from Animal Kingdom. Sorry, I'm going to take some time here.
Yes.
So think of a scenario. There's a jungle, there's a bird, and one of this bird's eggs has been eaten up by a snake. Okay. The news part of it, which I would like to believe was existing in the 90s, would say, okay, there was a people tree, there was a bird there, a snake came up, ate the egg, the bird is not feeling good, people are angry. This is a neutral stance. I told them what happened, what this is feeling, what this is feeling, and how the people are feeling. Storytelling took it a step further, I think somewhere in the early 2000s, where we would say the same story and we'd be like, okay, this treacherous, venomous, conniving snake climbed up the tree in all silence, hiding his moves, ate up the egg which could have developed into a baby, the baby which could have been the next future of the animal kingdom. So it suddenly becomes dramatic because in a warlike situation, the country's most important problem should not be what half of my population is thinking about. It should be that, okay, we are united and standing against the enemy. So it somewhere helps the institution. So I don't think that line will ever be unblurred. And it needs to be a very conscious decision on our part as citizens to see that, okay, is this where the line is? And what side of it am I standing on?
Question is, how do global powers like US, Russia, the European Union, and international bodies like WTO, IMF influence the media narrative surrounding conflicts like the one between India and Pakistan in May of
Just recently, I was here listening to this interview bid by one of the UPSC educators of our country who said that it is very easy for a country like United States of America to be a little strict on one of their corporate conglomerates and sort of wipe out a very heavy part of Indian economy by just banning Gmail in India. So it makes sense because of the kind of spread that it has, the kind of market cap it holds in India. So we as a country do feel very proud of the fact that, oh, we're the highest market cap country of so many international MNCs. But at the same time, we should also feel wary of the fact that those hands can be pulled at any point of time. So one way of them influencing directly how the news is seen is through channels like financial or economic ones. And I think the other way around is also how they have to manage their own geopolitics. For example, if I take USA for that matter, India is very important in Southeast Asia to counterbalance China. But at the same time, now Pakistan is growing in importance to counterbalance Afghanistan. You know,
Yes.
so it becomes very tricky on India's front, Pakistan's front, as well as USA's front to manage or forecast as to what might happen. Because the moment Pakistan's soft power goes up, there is a higher chance that USA might be bent a little more towards spinning the entire war narrative in a certain way. And again, these are not things that we're making up. These are things that we've seen happen in the world, wherein after a certain claimed terror attack in United States of America, one particular religion was branded as a criminal religion all across the world. So I'm saying the narrative power of US is second to none, right from the time of their independence. So having those geopolitical interests align with how the news channels are seen or how the news is seen per se, it again becomes a very tricky slope because there is no one factor here. For every country, there needs to be at least 100 different strategies to manage 100 different superpower, powers. So a very easy spin-off would be two nuclear powers coming face to face on a piece of land. That's essentially how the India-Pakistan conflict can be
Yes.
concluded. But again, if we say that, we would be ignoring a lot of factors like historical significances, colonial hangovers, local political rules, and whatever is going on within the South Asian economy, South Asian politics, South Asian geopolitics. So I think these media echo chambers, the Western outlets, are often mirroring their government's geopolitical interests.
How do Western and other international media outlets, to name a few,
Mhm.
BBC, Al Jazeera, frame the India Pakistan conflict? And how does this coverage reflect and reinforce existing geopolitical biases? Similar to the disproportionate focus on the conflicts in other regions like Gaza. So we have noted that there's a less reporting of the humanitarian violations in Gaza in the Western media. So how do they view our conflicts in South Asia?
Fair question. I'd like to take it bottom up when you said about uh, convenient ignoring or less reporting of instances of human right violations in Gaza. I wouldn't particularly want to relate it. So when what I'm saying is I'm not drawing a direct comparison, but I'm just quoting an example. There was this time in Nazi Germany wherein a space I'm from Delhi. So a place like Connaught Place, which is a central and a popular market of uh, Delhi, a place like that in Germany was the one where a lot of Jew bodies were placed one atop the other for burning. Okay. Now, imagine a space like Connaught Place where about 500 bodies are burning. The smell of the flesh burning was so pungent and it was so, I don't know, uncomfortable. It could also be smelled from like 3-4 kilometers away. But after the first few days, it became just as good as a little bit of inconvenience on the part of the German people. So it was not because those deaths were hidden, it was because it was hidden in plain sight. So I'm saying instances like Gaza, they become less reported or they end up being less reported because it's just hidden in plain sight. Every day you get to know, oh, 5,000 children were killed or 500 people were bombed here and there. It becomes repetitive for you to the point that you're like, okay, yeah, this is happening every day. What do we do about it? We can't. So let it just be. Now, coming to the stereotypes of the India-Pakistan conflict, I saw a slight change this particular one time, probably because of the change in the stance of international superpowers like US. But initially, whenever such conflicts have happened, we've heard these broad terms of terror sponsor such and such country versus the responsible democracy India. So the narrative would be set right from that. But this time around, it was more about two nuclear superpowers head to head or face to face with one another. So the first thing to observe was how conveniently we could unbrand, uh,
Hmm.
a country who has been historically called a terror sponsor and proved as such. Osama bin Laden was found in a military cantonment area of that country. But at the same time, I think April was when a conflict happened between India and Pakistan, and July was when Pakistan was chairing the UNSC. So I think situations like those could also be the reason why agencies like BBC or Al Jazeera or even bigger news channels or Reuters for that matter have been sort of reluctant to put it as that. But at the same time, I feel that historically, when we've called a country a terror sponsor and India as this responsible democracy, I feel that is also where we've been adding a lot of biases and a lot of, uh, I think, weasel words for both these countries. Because I feel like if you're just branding a country saying, oh, they're a terror sponsor, we can't do much about it, it is almost equivalent to saying men will be men. So you know that there is a problem there. It is internationally recognized to the point that they were also, I think, put in the grey list for FATF for a
Yes.
long time. Despite that, to become a chair of the UNSC without any opposition, despite that having media spin-offs in a certain way, despite that the president of United States saying that okay, it's a good country and blah 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 blah. It more than marking a international so to say con for India, it also discourages any future relationships. That okay, if a person is not standing with me in a point of conflict because their economic conflicts are coming over and above mine, then I might also be, in a position to frame my own global media in a certain way. But again, I think all of these questions bring me back to the same point that as long as there is one country which is controlling economically and financially a good part of the world, it is very evident that the capitalistic structure of the world will not allow any other media narrative to go out ever.
The discussion with Mr. Shrenik Jain educated me about how I must be consuming news in today's time. There are a lot of things at play. The international framework is determined by geopolitical strategies, international biases, and how every country views each other. News is not just factual reporting today. There is a lot of propaganda, and we must be educated enough in our fact checking in how we consume news in order to be responsible and safe.